So there is video out there in this world of Chad and a young 10th grade Creighton doing this interpretive dance to this like terrible 80s song. And it is awesome and it's glorious. Creighton has a super long ponytail and
and my shirt goes down to my knees.
Yes.
It's a
We're live, right? We're live.
We are live.
Okay,
everyone's hearing this about me right now.
We do need an updated version of this. Anyway, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams. I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. If you're local, come check us out one Sunday morning. Again, our service is at 10:30. If you're not local but looking for a church, Bible teaching church that you can join and watch and participate with online, Calvary316.live is our YouTube channel. We also stream Facebook.com/Calvary316. We'd love for you to join us digitally. Again, the service is at 10:30. You can learn all about the church by going to Calvary316.com. I am joined, as always, in studio by the man that needs no introduction, our resident Italian-American, Mr. Creighton Vaughn.
That's me. I'm the Italian-American.
You are
Hello,
the
everybody.
Italian. You are
Welcome to Outlaw Radio.
three-fifths Italian.
That's not how that math works out, but whatever. I'm like a quarter. I think I'm almost exactly a quarter, which is less than 3/5.
Don't sell yourself short. Hey!
Bugatti.
Hey, Bugatti, yeah.
I really need to rewatch The Sopranos and just write down the expletives that they use. And, yeah.
So, Jessica and I, when we watched The Sopranos, we literally had a plate of spaghetti every time.
You told me that. That's insane.
It was like our Friday night routine. Anyway, explain to the audience how the show works here.
No gabagoo.
Gabagoo. Explain how the show works.
So basically,
Creighton.
What normally happens is I will bring a topic and I will offer that topic to the room. Zach will make a Bible study of that topic, or we'll just discuss it depending on what the topic is. That's not what's happening tonight. What is possible tonight, like normal, is that if you have a question, comment, or concern about what we are talking about, you can put that into the comment section on Facebook or YouTube, and I am monitoring those on the computer in front of me. So hopefully we can get as close to real time as possible. Sometimes it's hard to butt in when Zach is talking to tell him about comments.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, that's basically how it works. There's also a phone number that you can text that I can never remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's 6
So
7.
say it slow because I have to type it out for the comments.
Okay, 678-883-3316. Again, 678-883-3316. You get the 316 at the end of that? That's intentional.
Why?
Because of Calvary 316, Creighton. You can also drop us an email at popecreighton@gmail.com. Again, popecreighton@gmail.com. And the video that you're watching, if you're joining us live, will be released tomorrow, the audio anyway, as a podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasting. Creighton kind of teased this. Today's episode will be a little bit different. Early years of the Outlaw Radio Show, we did a lot of interviews. We haven't done that in a while. We're going to be having an interview. Very excited about that. Before I get to that, before I introduce our guest, also want to say hello to Spice Daddy. How you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. You know, my seat keeps getting shifted to the left.
Yeah,
I have a theory about that.
We're moving you further and further away. We're kind of putting you in the Nikki Haley seat.
Eventually,
just further to the left.
See, that's not my theory. My theory is eventually I'm going to be in Creighton's seat, and you're just trying to get rid of Creighton.
You know, I have thought that it would be very funny when Creighton decides to go on vacation. That you would take over the production chair, and we just blur out your face, and I call you Creighton the whole time.
Can I wear the Pope hat?
You could wear the Pope hat.
I want to be very clear. I'm the only one to wear the Pope hat, which is why I have it.
That is true. We've
already talked about this.
I did gift you the Pope hat.
Oh my gosh, I made a joke.
Do you wear it just randomly at night?
No, I made a joke.
Like where you brush your teeth, you have the Pope hat on?
I made a joke like 6 months ago that I had forgotten about, but I made it on air. And my mom brought it up while I was down in Florida for Christmas.
Okay.
Because she did not like the joke.
Oh, I did not hear this.
Yes. So we were talking about it at some point, and I was like, "Oh,
you do know your mom's probably watching this."
Yeah, so yeah. I still think the joke is funny.
Okay, great. Okay.
We were talking about something, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm saving it for my wedding night." You know. She goes in the bathroom to put on something, and then she comes back out, and I'm in nothing but the Pope hat, which is still the plan. But yeah, that's what their Pope hat is.
And that's where you'll look across the room, you're like, What's up, Shulamite?
Yes.
Yes, that'll be your opening line. We had an elder. So I'm teaching through Song of Solomon, and we had an elders meeting on Sunday, and Chad, I forget what somebody made a joke, and it was perfect for like the "that's what she said" line, but
Yes.
Chad delivered the "that's what the Shulamite said" line, which was perfect. So that's gonna be the new joke. So Spice Daddy, you doing all right? You good?
Yeah.
Rocking and rolling.
Other than sitting in another different seat.
Okay. You know, we're just gonna move you around a lot now.
Okay, what is,
We need to get you a bigger chair, like more of a throne over there.
Yes, and then I can get a Roman emperor crown.
For the Roman Justinian.
Yeah.
Protected. Gosh. We also have two guests, two of our brothers that are in studio with us. We've got Isaac is with us. A football mom is with us, but he is in a guest chair tonight. You want to say anything to the audience that you're here?
Football mom is in the house.
Is in the house.
Thankful to be here. Definitely brought some good stuff. I brought some barbecue rub that no one wants, but if anyone,
that's
If you'd
terrible.
like us to send that to you,
listen,
Yes.
if anyone listening is looking for some opened but not really used that I know of barbecue spice rub, just let me know.
Yes.
and you should sign it. A signed copy of some barbecue spice rub.
But for the record, you'll need to send $5 for the shipping, because we're not going to pay for
I
that.
can't cover that.
Yeah, we're not paying.
I'll give you a piece of chocolate with it though.
A piece in the mail with it. So we also have a good friend, a dear brother of ours, John Schaefer, is in the house, which is great. And so we kind of had to bring in another old chap for some interesting questions, I think. But getting to the hot topic here.
Before you get to the hot topic,
What do we got going?
I do have a comment. It is
Oh.
from longtime friend of the show, Miss Ann. I want to say hi, Miss Ann.
Ann.
Hey, Miss Ann.
Hello.
Yes, welcome, Miss Ann. And that's it. That's what you had.
Yep.
You interrupted all that for that.
I'm trying to get better at it. You told me to be more aggressive last week, so here we are.
that is true. But that was with your dating life, not with your chair here at the
Hey,
Outlaw
small
Radio
steps.
Show.
Small steps.
Yeah,
Small steps.
We need you aggressive in your dating life, not here, per se. I've been blessed over the last how many years? Probably 6 or 7 years now, to have gotten to know a dear brother. He and his wife have become really good friends, close friends of our family. Ed will periodically play drums at our church. He and his wife gifted us our dog that is shedding hair all over the house, and Jessica wants to kill me for. I appreciate that, brother. But just a really good friend, and we've had some wonderful conversations. Has a very unique insight. Has just this plethora of experience that is just really interesting. And I've had the joy of hearing a lot of these stories. Thought it'd be fun to have him on the show. One of my favorite memories with Ed is that I'm a diehard Atlanta Braves fan. Been an Atlanta Braves fan forever. Ed happens to be an Angels fan, totally unrelated. But is a dear baseball fan, so we had that connection. And but I've never been to a playoff game. In all the years that I've lived in Georgia, I've never been to a Braves playoff game. And the Braves were playing the Dodgers a couple years ago, and Ed got tickets. He scored some tickets, and I mean, like, Club 360 seats right behind home plate. They were awesome. And he called me and was like, "You want to go to the ball game?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Absolutely. And it was a wonderful experience. Yeah. Just become a dear brother. And so I want to welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show, Mr. Ed McTaggart. How you doing, my friend?
Good, thank you.
So let's start a little bit about just who you are, and kind of a little bit of your claim to fame, and then I'm going to set some context.
Okay. I'm nobody special. I was young, not churched, and this thing was happening. I graduated high school from 1969, and this thing was happening in Orange County, where I was from.
So you grew up in Southern California.
Southern California, and that I'd heard about, and we went down to check it out a couple of times. They were at that point, the church. It was a small church, Chuck Smith's Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. It was a small church, and they bought some property from the Segerstroms, who owned all the property around there, including all of South Coast Plaza. If you've ever been out there, they bought some property, and they were, you know, the church was starting to grow really quickly because of this Jesus movement thing, which I knew nothing, you know, I didn't know Jesus is. I didn't know. It was really weird, you know, but it was explained in such a simple way. It just made sense to me, because I wasn't like I said, I wasn't a church guy, but it was explained very simply to me. And in my mind, I just, well, that really makes sense. You know, I don't have a drug problem or anything, but boy, that really makes sense.
So you got saved at Calvary Chapel
Yes.
with Pastor Chuck,
Well, it wasn't.
or was
Pastor
it
Chuck.
Lonnie? Was Lonnie preaching?
Lonnie at that time was not around very much. I never actually met him, but I believe it was Mike McIntosh,
Oh, okay.
and also at the Saturday night concerts. But before I really accepted the Lord, I went to a couple of these tent concerts, and they'd have them every Saturday night.
So let me set just a bit of context historically for what was going on that you found yourself kind of at the inception of.
Yeah.
Just for the audience, in case you're not aware. So there was a movie that just came out. I said just came out last year. It's called Jesus Revolution. It was about what we call historically is the Jesus movement. Now, Greg Laurie wrote a book, and I'll plug the book. The book is Jesus Revolution, and it was his account of the early days of Calvary Chapel and a unique revival that took place, not just in Southern California, but a revival that took place across America. It was as close to an awakening that we have had since Whitfield or the Wesleys. A unique thing that God did at the end of the 60s, the early part of the 70s, where thousands and thousands and thousands of hippies were coming to know the Lord. And not just hippies, but like you had people across the country, my dad being one of them, you know, who was not a hippie, but was this, you know, this Southern, you know, more Leonard Skinner style, Good Boys Alabama. But like there was this way, like the Holy Spirit moved. Mm-hmm. And we call it the Jesus movement. There have been a lot of, there's a movie about it. There's a lot of articles that have been written about it. Famously, Times Magazine did a full write-up about it with the cover shot of people getting baptized in the Cove there in Southern California. And so all of this was going on. One of the central, again, the Jesus movement wasn't just about Calvary Chapel, but Calvary Chapel found itself in kind of the heartbeat of what was going on. And you had Pastor Chuck. So Pastor Chuck Smith had been in the Foursquare denomination for years and years and years. Had left the ministry. He was roofing, I think, at the time. He got invited. There was a little non-denominational church called Calvary Chapel. They asked him to come in and be their pastor. And so he did, but he was like, you know, I'm so burnt out on religion, so burnt out on traditionalism. Yeah. I'm just going to teach the Bible. I just want to teach the Bible. As Chuck would say, I want to simply teach God's word simply. And so he did. And then there was this whole thing that kind of happened. And again, the movie deals with this, where Lonnie Frisbee came in and they started welcoming hippies that were hungry, looking for something. And then God did this thing. Yeah. Just took off. And in the course of that, you know, the little building that they had there in Costa Mesa was no longer adequate. And so you'll hear Calvary people talk about the tent. John actually made the comment earlier, said, hey, explain the tent a little, because for those that may be on the outside, we don't know what that is. Anyone within Calvary Chapel remembers the tent, or will talk about the tent, or have recollections of the tent. Yeah. Because in the middle of all of this, when the church building couldn't hold anyone, and they had bought this piece of property, they put up a big tent as they were renovating and trying to build a larger building. Right. They did church in a tent, which you can pull off in Southern California because the weather cooperates. Not Georgia or Montana, not good places to try to do church in a tent. Yeah. But in Southern California, it could work. And then in the course of that, you had all kinds of, and this was something that was unique with Pastor Chuck, is that he wanted to allow, he put no restrictions on how you came. No. So we got away from church attire, come as you are. So the hippies felt welcomed. You know, there's a famous scene in a story where, you know, the group of former elders of Calvary Chapel were getting all bent out of shape about these hippies and how dirty they were, and they weren't wearing shoes, and they had just bought all this new carpet, and they were destroying the carpet. And Chuck was like, "You guys your priorities are totally backwards." And so, what did Chuck do? He set up out in front of the building and washed feet. You know, as people started coming in. So you know, you get these stories. But in the course of that, the other thing that Chuck did that was unique, in addition to like, hey, just come as you are, is that he allowed again the hippies to worship God with a more modern flair, to incorporate their own worship music into their expression. Up until that point, it's all hymnals, mostly a cappella, accompanied by organ or piano, but to allow an acoustic guitar, a band, and so with the tent, with the Jesus movement, you really had the birth of not just modern Christian worship music, but just Christian music in general. Yeah. And this is why you're kind of here, is not only were you there just for the tent experience, but you ended up finding yourself kind of part of this real radical new expression that we call Christian music today. But you ended up being part of a few different bands, probably most famously Daniel Amos. So what I want to do is, and again, setting the context, kind of more of the historical scene here. I want you to start by just talking about, before we get to the music and the bands and all of that, just your own conversion experience, and then just what it was like to be there, how unique it was, what the feeling was. Just, again, you're an eyewitness to this, something that is historical. Again, we're making movies about it. There are magazine articles being written about it. You were there. So just talk, and again, I want you to personalize it as much as you can, just your own experience. Okay. But just talk about just what God was doing.
Well, like I mentioned, I wasn't very church, so I didn't know much about the Bible. But I was going to these things, and these mainly the Saturday night. I hadn't gone to a church service, but the Saturday night they always had a concert, and there would be these. So music was a very big part of my conversion, and I made that decision. Like I said, I'm not sure if it was Mike or it could have been Tom Stipe. It wasn't Greg, because Greg came along a little later, but I made that decision. And you see, it wasn't that big a deal to me as far as what was the scope of what was going on. We didn't know. We didn't know there's some big Jesus movement thing that was actually happening. We were just showing up and
it was personal.
Worshiping the Lord, and there were people coming forward, and what is this, like a Billy Graham thing, the big tent, like a tent revival? Is that what this kind of old time gospel stuff? But it wasn't. Because the way it was explained to me and the way the Bible was taught came down to our level, and we were always felt very comfortable. There was no anybody judging us, or I was never really kind of a hippie. I was kind of a clean cut athlete guy, college guy, but I was accepted just as much as the other people, and when you have a experience like that, like we all have had some kind of an experience accepting God, and it took a while. There was at first like, wow, this is great, and then it took a little while because I needed to get fed more. I needed Bible study, and I didn't even know what that really meant. I wasn't really a very good student.
Right.
So did that mean I've got to take notes on I'm going to have a test or so it was a little rough to go at first, but like I said, the music brought me in. I remember going to see Love Song, which is mentioned quite a bit in that movie, and not only that, in books. Great, incredibly talented group of guys.
There's a documentary actually coming out this year.
Right.
Similar to like the Jesus Revolution movie, but just documenting Love
And,
song, because they were pioneers.
Well, Chuck Girard, who was kind of one of the lead singers and songwriters, was in the Hondells, and so he had a secular background. So did Jay Truax, the bass player, and John Mailer, the drummer. I'm not sure what his background was, but Bob Wall, they're an incredible, talented group. And I remember sitting out there and saying, wow, that is, I played drums, but man, this is, John Mailer just did this incredible drum solo. And all the groups, back then, Children of the Day, Hosanna, The Way, just countless groups were all of a sudden were popping up. And they were like debuting on Saturday night at Calvary Chapel. So as fast as people were getting saved, this music thing started happening, getting really big. And there was a little office which ended up being the Calvary Chapel store. It was where Maranatha Music was born. And I believe that Mike McIntosh was kind of in charge of it at first. And so they put up a bulletin board in there, anybody looking for a musician for a group to get together, And I had given thought to it until I heard Love Song. I've got no talent as far as that goes, but my wife at the time talked me into going down and put my name on it, and lo and behold, I got a call from Bill Sprouse and Jim Frank. Jim Frank's up there in Nashville. He might be listening in. Asked me to come down and hang out. We have like a Bible study and a potluck, and we jam. And at the time, I was working at Wind Ambulance. I started out as an attendant. They didn't have paramedics back then, and I couldn't handle the accidents and stuff like that. So they gave me a job in the sick room supply store. So I was doing that job, and then they go, you want to play in the group? And I said, yeah. Well, it's a full-time ministry. And I said, ministry, full time? Oh, wait a minute. I'm a new Christian. What if you want me to preach or something?
Right.
No, just play drums, and we'll just write songs, and we play at high schools. And
So what band was this?
The group was actually, it was called Sanctified, but later they changed it to Road Home because Bill Sprouse, the singer and songwriter, was on ABC Dunhill, and the group was the Road Home.
So I think we have an actual photo of this. Creighton, if you could put this up. So this explain what we're looking at here.
That is, I'm pretty sure about this. Jerry Chamberlain is a DA member, might remember, but I think we were one of the first groups at the time to play when the chapel was built.
So this is Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. This is the new sanctuary that they built.
That's right. And
which the shag carpet is epic.
Shag carpet,
yeah, which is awesome. and so you're the drummer. You're in the middle, and then kind of work us through the band. Maybe going right from the keyboards, working to the left.
That's Bill Sprouse over there on the Fender Rhodes, and then that's Phil Alardo on acoustic guitar, and then myself, and then John Falcone, good friend of mine, good brother.
Who's in all white?
Yeah, he's the bass player playing that Rickenbacker.
Yeah, it's a classic bass guitar.
And then that's John Wytock, who played lead guitar for us. And
so about what year is this?
That's probably 73. Because we Road Home had been together about 2 years before Bill passed away, the songwriter. And we were playing all over. They had something called the Circuit Tour. And these are new Calvary chapels that are sprouting up
that are popping up all
along the West Coast, and so they'd put us in one of Chuck's. Chuck had a couple motorhomes, and we'd go up the coast and as far as Eureka and back down. Some of those pastors are still. You know who Wayne Taylor is?
Yeah, I know.
Seattle.
Yeah,
he is had one of the first churches up there, and the groups would go up and we would play. And so that's what was happening with all those guys. We were doing that quite a bit. And one quick side story, we had played that concert, and the next morning after the 11 o'clock service at Calvary with Chuck, that was always the musicians, the latest one, because we were always playing usually somewhere. So on Sunday we'd go to we're standing outside of the Maranatha Music office just chatting. And I looked over my shoulder over to the building. And it was, there was still some construction going on, but it was working. And around the corner comes Pastor Romaine.
Who was Pastor Chuck's right-hand man.
Yeah, kind of a military
Oh, no,
kind
he
of
was...
guy.
Pastor Chuck, they always said, was grace because Pastor Romaine was the law.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he came around the corner, and he's kind of looking down, and he stopped, and he looked over, and he saw us. And then he looked down again, and then he started walking towards us. Oh, what did we do last night? What did we say? We're in trouble. And he came up to us and said, hey, boys, how you doing? Oh, good. I just wanted to tell you, I was really blessed last night. Keep it up. And then he turned and walked away.
He turned and walked away, right, yeah.
That was,
Quintessential Romaine, for sure.
But, that was a real magical time. Yeah, as you were saying, there was a real spiritual awakening going on, especially going into that new church. There were groups just popping up all over the place. Daniel Amos was one of them. So they came to hear Road Home all the time. We were their favorite group.
So let's kind of transition to Daniel Amos a little bit. So the Christian music scene there, right, with the Jesus movement and this awakening, and again, this revival was based in the teaching of God's word, simply teaching God's word, simply expositional Bible teaching. But then there was the people that were getting moved had an avenue of expressing their love for the Lord and through worship and allowing their musical abilities to be a blessing. And again, like you're saying, you got all these bands and they're touring up and down, going to all these different churches. And you were part of one of those early bands. Did you ever play in the tent? So we saw a picture of
Road Home. We played in the tent.
Okay, so we saw a picture of you guys playing in the new sanctuary, but you played in the tent.
Yeah.
So if you see the Jesus Revolution movie, and there's several scenes where you have Lonnie Frisbee and you got Love Song primarily featured, playing in the tent.
Yeah. Ed
McTaggart was there. Ed played drums in the tent, which is great. Yeah. So you're playing with one group. You always joke around is that like a professional drummer has a profession that isn't drumming. You had to make a living somewhere else. Yeah. So you were playing, but you were also you ended up working actually for Maranatha, right?
Yeah. I was just telling John earlier. I guess I had to have a job.
I had to have a job,
and I had some kids, and I've got to take care of that. So I was trying to balance that, but it started out working in the Maranatha Music Warehouse, packing up CDs and Chuck Smith's tapes and shipping them out, and then from there, I'll just make kind of quickly here. When they had a position open in music publishing, and I was fascinated with that with the band because I wanted to understand more about the business side of things and how that works. And so I worked a couple of years there, I think, or at least a year and a half, and learned quite a bit. But my typing skills weren't quite like they needed. So my friend Alex McDougall, who was later joined Daniel Amos for a couple albums, percussionist and drummer, he was working for Maranatha Music doing their artwork for their covers. And I remember Al, I'm kind of looking for some extra work. Do you got anything? And he said, yeah, take these record, here's some type, take this template and go home and paste up some record labels for me. Cut and paste, the songs. And
literally cut and paste.
Yeah. And so that kind of got me into the graphic end of things. And later on in our history, I started doing album covers, and then I worked for Jimmy Kempner, who was another evangelist from Calvary back in that day. He started up a company called Frontline Records, which was a lot of the bands that came over from Calvary. Well, what happened? There was back up just a second. Calvary got to a point to where they couldn't support or didn't want to support all the rock groups.
Yeah.
And they moved towards the praise albums, worship albums.
That's what Maranatha made a pivot to that.
Right.
Yeah,
they made a pivot, and they gave us all, free to go wherever you want. And again, I worked, so just as far as the working thing goes, I worked at Frontline Music Group for 8 years, probably designed 300 album covers.
So how did you end up with Daniel? Daniel Amos was a band already formed. You had been playing in another band. How did you land with Daniel Amos?
Well, Bill Sprouse, the singer-songwriter for The Road Home, real big guy, passed away suddenly from a massive heart attack. That was a sad day for all of us.
I'm sure.
Because we were 2 weeks away from doing our own album. We had two songs on the collection albums, Maranatha Music 3 and 4. I think we had one song on each one. That was kind of like how you got into it.
Real quick, let me explain this to the young kids, because I remember this. Creighton, you even had this. So like, the easiest example for anyone that's under 40 is that you remember the Wow albums. Justin, you remember the Wow albums?
Yes.
So you would have explain to the audience what the Wow album was, Justin.
Basically, Wow, and the earliest CDs I ever got was Wow 2000. It's basically a collection of the most popular songs in Christian music at the time. And then one of my favorite things from those albums was like they put in a couple up and coming bands. So
Right.
Wow 2000, Switchfoot.
Oh, that's how you
Nice.
discovered
Solid.
Switchfoot. There
Yep,
you go.
New Way to Be Human. Wow 2000. I remember that clearly, getting it for Christmas.
So you would
That's the same thing.
you would have a compilation album
Yep.
that featured a bunch of different bands. So instead of going out and like blindly exploring the record shelves or the CDs, you could get one album and then, oh man, I really like that band. And then you could go and explore and learn a little bit more about them. So that was kind of an old school way of doing it. Now that's obsolete because everything's streamed and you've got basically singles released. It's the music industry's different, but just for the
Completely
young
changed.
crew,
Completely changed.
it's completely changed. But back
Yeah.
so you
we-
guys had a few songs, but you
Yeah.
were working on an album, and
And-
then your buddy died.
And so did Daniel Amos had one song on one of those records. So concurrently, we had been a group for a couple of years, but they were just getting started. But Bill died suddenly, and we were, like I said, 2 weeks away from doing our own record. You know, and that was kind of like how it happened. You know, you get on a Maranatha album, and if things go well, you might get it. They might finance your. So
Right.
anyhow, Daniel Amos was playing at one of these big concerts. I'm pretty sure it was Knott's Berry Farm. I think it's Jimmy Kempner was sponsoring these things, and he'd get a collection of artists, not necessarily all Calvary artists, but
Right.
John Gibson, the different artists from across the country that were popping up, like you were saying earlier, and they'd have a night, you know, like maybe New Year's Eve night, and it would be all Christian bands all over the park. Well, since I was not employed in a band at the time, I was looking for extra things, and I think it was Jeff Smith, Chuck's younger son.
Yeah, one of Chuck's sons.
Yeah, Chuck Smith's son.
And you were working with him at Maranatha,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. He said, "Hey, you guys, you and John, you know, the bass player for Road Home, they could use some help roadieing the equipment in and out at the Disney. We can give you a couple $100." And so, yeah,
Right.
I'll hump some boxes for that. So I was assigned to the venue that had Daniel Amos and a group called Aslan, a young group, and so loaning in stuff, and the drummer had this monster drum set. I don't know. This is like, you know, late 70s, early 80s, monster drum set. The stuff was popular, I guess. And so Terry Taylor, who's the songwriter and singer primarily with Daniel Amos, came up and asked me, "Hey, you want to sit in?" "How'd you know I played drums?" "Oh, you're Road Home. That's our favorite band. We come see you guys all the time. We love Bill. We're really sorry what happened, but why don't you sit in tonight?" So, "Well, I don't know the songs." You know, "Well, it's okay. Just
follow along.
yeah." So that's how I got in the group. They called me the next Monday after that and asked me to, you know, to be in the group, and so I've been in that band ever since 1976.
So technically, they didn't have a drummer per se.
No.
They were it was more of a hired gun. They had recorded an album without a
Right.
drummer, studio guys. So they were looking for someone.
Well, they needed a drummer to go and play those songs at
Right.
the high schools and colleges and stuff.
But you ended up becoming more of a permanent option, and that's how it all started.
Yeah. And now, you know, all
So
these
you've
years
been
later,
with them. You've been with Daniel Amos for how many years?
well, since '76, and we're still officially not. We lost our bass player, passed away 2 years ago, but we haven't like given up. I mean, we recorded another record after 2011. It came out in 2014 called "Dig Here Says the Angel," and that was our last full-on recorded album. And Terry has had a series of solo albums, and that all of us in one way or another participated, and then a spin-off groups called Swirling Eddies. There's got to be. Terry is such a prolific writer.
Well, let's just for some context, Creighton, let's throw some pictures up, and Ed, I want you to kind of explain what we're seeing. So I'm fascinated by this image for two reasons. So it says Christian musicians, was it Angry Young Men? What explain what this magazine?
Oh, jeez. Yeah. I don't have any idea what they meant by that. We weren't angry about anything.
So it's like, what is that?
Well, our music, if you were to listen to our albums from one to the next, you wouldn't recognize who we were, because we were kind of like, Terry likes to explain it as an experimental kind of group. So every time we went in the studio, it would be a stretch, doing something different, maybe more related closely to the culture that was around us, secular music.
Right.
So you can hear influences of Beatles and Beach Boys, Talking Heads, David Bowie, throughout our whole history. I mean, there's probably of actual Daniel Amos albums, including live albums, I don't know, 25 or 30 records. It's a pretty big catalog for.
Now you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong here. So there was this
one's specifically about this though. That's the a group picture of us for the cover of.
Yeah, keep that up, Creighton.
Not Darn Floor Big Bite. Horrendous Disc was the name of the album, and Larry Norman had purchased our contract from Maranatha Music, and so we'd already recorded Shock and Angels, did really well. So we started the new record with Maranatha Music, and during the middle of that's when things separated, and we ended up being on Larry's label, and the album didn't come out for 4 years.
You still wear the white gloves every now and then?
So that was going to be my question: what's with the white gloves?
That was Al's idea. Big Al McDougall. He's the second from the right, and he's had a long career in Christian music industries in Nashville. He's producer, songwriter.
And he was like, "You need to be wearing white gloves."
I don't know. It's just we're kids, you know. And we got the skinny tie thing, you know, and I don't know, whatever, trying to be cool. But it was a difficult time for us, because that record was delayed by Larry for whatever reason, and then we lost half of the guys you're seeing there. It was just it was me and Jerry and Terry and Marty. Four of us went on, and we got a deal with Benson Company, and that's when the Alarma album came out. And the Alarma album was a complete different sound from Horrendous Disc, which was just more of a classic kind of rock opera stuff. Well, Alarma was like Talking Heads, you know. It's like that whole early 80s thing, loud and raw. So then we totally confused our audience, you know. So as we went along, our music changed, and we lost fans and gained some.
That sounds like the perfect album for me. I'm gonna add it to my playlist.
Yeah, there you go. So we're gonna. I got a few follow-up questions to all that.
Sure.
Let's run through a couple more photos. Okay. You guys have a bit of an obsession with cowboy hats and a country feel. So this is an early. So you're still Maranatha Music. Obviously, you can see
that's Daniel Amos. That's probably 1976. That's in South Bend, Indiana, public parks. You can tell.
So that's early as far as you joining the band.
Right. We're doing the songs that are on the first album.
On the first album.
Yeah.
So obviously you're on drums, but tell us who these people are from right to left.
Jerry Chamberlain, great guitar player, good brother. He's living up in Nashville now. And then Terry Taylor with the cowboy hat on. He's the singer-songwriter for the band, and myself. And then Steve Baxter, who was an original Daniel Amos guy that came down. Terry was originally in San Jose, Los Gatos. And the two of those guys came down and eventually got involved in Maranatha Music. And then Marty Deckmeyer over there on the left, he's the surfer of the band on bass.
And he stayed with you guys. He's the guy that recently passed away a couple of years ago?
No.
So there was another bass player.
Tim Chandler took Marty's place.
Okay.
Marty, after the Alarma album, Marty left, and then Tim Chandler was with us, and Greg Flesh was our guitar player. Great name for a guitar player, Greg Flesh.
How come you never had a mustache like the other guys?
Every time I tried to grow a beard, I'd look homeless. So.
Oh, okay.
It's a good question, Spice Daddy. Yeah.
But
So
our-
let's throw up another photo here, Creighton. So I love this photo. So you're the guy hanging out of the truck.
Yeah, I don't know what the idea with the truck was, but and then the start, because this was the Shock and Angel album. So the first half of the album, the second album, was primarily kind of a country rock thing, still mirroring the first album. The second side was completely different.
Yeah,
I was
real bell
gonna
bottoms right
say
here,
something.
yeah.
Those bell bottoms are wild.
And
yeah.
corduroy.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
So we got a couple more, I think, right, Cray?
Yep, we got the one from recently.
Oh, so this was explain. This was the last time you guys played
Right.
together, the last
Well,
tour.
The 2011, from right to left. Greg Flesh, who I mentioned, our guitar player, he's also a rocket scientist. He works for JPL. His team is analyzing the Mars rocks and sand right now.
Wow.
And then our bass player, Paul Averett from Dallas, Texas, incredibly talented young guy. We had to replace our bass player because he passed on.
Right.
And so, he walked in, he knew all our songs. He didn't have to,
Didn't skip a beat.
didn't have a chart, didn't have nothing, anything. He did that tour with us. I'm back there with my cream shirt on. And then Terry Taylor.
Is that a
again.
cream shirt?
Yeah.
All right.
And then Terry Taylor, singer-songwriter, and Jerry Chamberlain, who had been with us all along.
So is Ginger Baker the greatest drummer of all time?
Well, you got to put him into eras.
Okay, so
Okay, jazz, big band.
you run
Louis
the
Bellson. Louis Bellson.
Okay.
Not that other guy that everybody hated. Then progressive jazz, Joe Morello, who was Dave Brubeck Quartet.
Okay.
And then radical rock, I guess you'd have to go with Keith Moon and Ginger Baker. Ginger Baker probably much more talented. Definitely Ginger Baker. And then for pop rock, Ringo. Could you not love that guy? He just I'm kind of like Ringo a little bit. I just show up and they tell me what to play.
Kept perfect time.
I was Steady Eddie,
That's right.
but yeah.
So we got one more, right? I
Yeah.
love this photo. 'cause
This one's the cowboy hat.
Yeah, it's all cowboy hats and Ed with no shirt on. And there's a funny story to this
True
photo.
story, yeah, that's
So-
at New Mexico State. I think it was a state. I don't think it was a federal prison. It's kind of halfway between Albuquerque and Santa Fe.
State prison, and it's real hot, obviously.
Yeah, it was there in the summer. Yeah, and they put us out in the yard, and then they lined up all the inmates. There was a fence between us, a small fence. They all lined up out there, and we were going to give them a concert, and they gave them half a cantaloupe and a scoop of ice cream in it, and they enjoyed it, and they really received us very well. We were able to preach a little bit, but there was no altar call or anything. And then 2 weeks later, after we had got back home from that particular tour, there was a huge riot at that prison where guards were killed and inmates were killed. They were holding hostages. And we think, well, maybe we have a career going around causing trouble everywhere we go. That could be the angry young men. I don't know.
Where did the name Daniel Amos come from?
Well, early on back then, all the good names were taken. Children of the Day, Hosanna, Love Song, all these cool names for Christian bands. They were all there. So we thought, well, all the good ones are gone. What do we do? And it was probably Terry and Jerry that came up with it. But we'll just two Old Testament Bible prophets. We'll just put them together, like Leonard Skinner or like Jethro Tull.
Daniel Amos.
Don't want to know who Daniel Amos. So who's Daniel Amos? Or are you Daniel and you're Amos? So it was simple as that. That stuck. And later on, everybody shortened it up for just DA. So we were known as DA for quite a bit too. I'm back and forth.
So I'd like you to talk a little bit because I think there's something that's happened recently in Christian music that happened to you. Obviously, things go in cycles. It's weird. I have found it odd as of late. So, and Justin, you can speak to this as well. So, when I was in high school, middle school, high school, my first cassette tape was New Thing by DC Talk. And then I got Jesus Freak was my first CD. I got an early Jars of Clay album.
Was it Flood?
It was the whatever the one was that had Flood on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Liquid, I think, was one of the other songs. And then I that introduced me to Christian music. And so I was a big DC Talk fan, but I then started following Pray for Rain, Small Town Poets. I went through a gamut of Christian music, of just good bands writing uplifting lyrics. This was not worship music. It was what we would call Christian music, and we'll get there. I mean, and then even then, there was a huge Christian rap scene, Christian hip hop from. So our intro track is Mars Ill. You had Ambassadors for Christ. You had John Rubin. You can run down say what?
T-Bone.
Yeah, you had
one of my favorites.
You had all kinds of Christians that were doing music that was uplifting and Christian oriented.
Soon to be 50 Cent, right? You're
Right.
bringing him
Oh,
in.
man. That's where you decided to jump in.
That's the most important.
Chances are not zero.
Chances are not zero. When we
That's
get to
true.
the end, someone's gonna have to explain that. But what's crazy, and I'm gonna set Christian rap music aside because it's kind of it's an outlier at the moment, and maybe Toby Mac is an outlier, but the entire Christian music scene doesn't exist like it did when I was growing up. MXPX. I mean, you had even when there was that whole secular craze of ska, you had Supertones, you had Five Iron Frenzy, you had all kinds of Christian bands that would come out, and it was big, and we had festivals like you had. For us, it was Atlanta Fest. It was at Stone Mountain Park for years, and then they moved it to Six Flags over Georgia. But you would have all these bands, and that's how you got introduced to stuff. You bought CDs. There was a whole Christian music scene. Mm-hmm. Today, and I kind of left it all for a while just because it was not a real relevant thing. But I've now got a middle schooler, and so he's getting into music, and so I'm revisiting all of this, and there's nothing. Toby Mac is kind of the outlier, I would say, in regards to doing he's not doing worship music, he's just doing Christian music, and then you've got a ton of rap, from Lecrae to NF to you just can run.
I think you also have to, and this is kind of outlier. The metal Christian metal scene is still very active.
When I was at Frontline Music Group, I was telling John I was a creative director there for 8 or 9 years. And we went through all those metal bands. We had a lot of metal bands and a lot of rap bands. So that would have been in late 80s, early 90s.
Well, that was our time.
Yeah.
But today,
Vengeance,
today you
Blood
listen. Great example. You turn on the Christian radio, and all you're gonna get, all that's there, is worship music. It's all worship music. To even the point that like a guy like Stephen Curtis Chapman, who is a fantastic songwriter, musician in his own right, there's no place for him. So what has he had to do? He's now coming out with worship albums. Michael W. Smith, it's worship albums. They're the Christian music scene. You turn on the radio, it's just wall to wall worship music.
You're saying worship album versus what?
I'm saying and John, who is in studio, wants me to differentiate between a Christian album and a worship album. Yeah. A worship album, I'll very narrowly define as songs written for corporate worship. There's songs that are written to be played on Sunday mornings because they sell and there's mass marketing. These are the Chris Tomlins, Passion, Bethel, Hillsong, Phil Wickham. Just
Lauren Daigle.
Lauren Daigle even, although she can somewhat cross over just a little bit, but primarily that's what she's doing because these are the clicks, this is what sells, this is what and then you have the contracts where you're playing these songs in church and they're getting a cut for it, and so worship music, songs that can be sung in the worship setting at church, that now dominates. Mm-hmm. the larger umbrella of Christian music.
You know,
The only other things are Christian rap, etc. Back in the day, when all these things like first manifested, like when Christian music first manifested, when you go back to Love Song, it was pretty worship oriented, I would say, initially.
I would say it is really different. Worship music for us back then was choruses. You'd come out and sing a chorus, and they would. Almost all the solo artists had their own chord. Karen Lafferty, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and all His righteousness, and these things will be added unto. Hallelujah, hallelujah," over and over and over again. And Chuck would come out and lead choruses before his Bible studies on the midweek.
He'd close his service the same way. May the Lord bless thee.
So that
and
was
keep
what
thee.
that was what worship music was.
Yeah.
So now I remember. I'm so far out of it for a long time. Coming back out here,
let me just take a second and present
totally
a very particular question for you, because you described this transition that happened in Maranatha music, where Calvary Chapel made a decision to make Maranatha music more worship oriented.
Exactly.
And all of the other bands that existed, Daniel Amos included, that weren't exactly worship bands, but were Christian bands. It was kind of like, hey, we're not going to hold you captive, but this is not the direction we're going anymore, and we're going to kind of cut you loose, which is why that one album got tied up for years, right?
That had a lot to do with it, yeah.
So explain that, because I do think we're seeing the same thing happen now. You see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, is kind of a unique situation. Larry signed us. You know, I don't want to get too deep into some of the personal things.
No,
there,
no, you don't have to
but
at all.
Larry coerced us into signing with him, and then he had to go back in and change some song. He wanted to change some of the songs, drop a song, change, because it was essentially the done record. Just needed some final mixes done. Changed it, and we were out on the road supporting that record that hasn't come out yet. We're out there playing songs on Horrendous Disc, and people had never heard. So they're, what is this? What happened to the Daniel Amos that was on the first album? So there was like a crossover that wasn't connecting with the people, as far as us playing in colleges and churches. At that era, we were probably playing more clubs in colleges than churches.
You would not have defined Daniel Amos as a worship band.
No, although there's some really cool worship songs, and I'd love to share some of them with you sometimes.
Absolutely.
They're unique because of, I don't want to get too far off the track, but because of Terry's talent as a writer, well read. He's probably read all these books you have here, and he's inspired by a lot of those writers. Frederick Buechner, who I know Chad likes. There's a song that Scandalous Night.
Mm-hmm.
Those are written by two friends of ours up in Nashville. So there's that type of music kind of took over as far as the industry went, and Maranatha definitely went to praise albums and children's albums. And to this day, they probably still are involved in some of that, probably repackaging now as far as doing new stuff. I don't really know that Maranatha's
I have no idea.
Even a company anymore. But yeah, and that album, Larry decided to hold on to until he could mess with it. And we're out recording, not recording, playing all these shows with those songs and no product to deliver to them. And so it was almost 2 years. And, you can't survive unless you have. So we got a lawyer and got out of that deal
and had to work
and then recorded our Alarma album, and then within 1 week of the release of the Alarma album, Horrendous Disc came out. So killed both of them, because we split our audience. This is this 80s sound. This is cool. This is like Talking Heads. It's like the Ramones.
Yeah.
Kind of a cross between. So it was that kind of record, and then there's Horrendous Disc that's all melodic and studio produced. So that changed the direction of our group, and for the rest, in my opinion, the best albums came after that.
What's the best Daniel Amos album? Like if there's somebody that's watching this right now and they've never heard of Daniel Amos before, and they're gonna go to Spotify or YouTube Music, and they're gonna find one album. What album would you tell them to listen to?
Well, that's subjective, obviously.
Nah, but you're the drummer.
The critic's choice is probably Darn Floor Big Bite.
Say that again?
Darn Floor Big Bite. That is, you ever heard of Coco the Gorilla, where they taught sign language to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was the theme of the record is built around that. They played a video of the San Francisco earthquake back in the 40s or whatever that was, and she signed Darn Floor Bad Bite. In other words, she's describing what she's seeing. The floor is shaking, and it's a bad bite, and Terry kind of thought about that as far as the theme goes. Isn't that what God probably thinks when we try to describe him? And so he took that and wrote the song about it. So it's a really good album. It's very well produced. My favorite album, however, is not one of the more popular ones, but it's called Bible Land. And it is a record that was not rehearsed. It was just guitars, bass, drums, and vocals. And we went in and recorded it. Terry would come up with an idea, or Tim, our bass player, would come up with a riff, or and similar to what you guys were playing earlier.
Yeah.
You start with some chord structure, and you we did that for like 2 weeks in the studio, and came up with this album. The song "Stowaway" I think I might have sent you lyrics to at some point. My all-time favorite song. It's about resurrection. And then there's a praise song that's on another record, which I want to share with you.
Yeah.
What's Come Over Me. And it's about God's omnipresence. But it's written in a different way. I mean, I listen, I'm playing this Sunday. I was listening to all those songs, and there's something polished about all that.
It's all polished. Yes.
It's different than what we were doing or did or still doing, kind of.
Well, explain. Can you maybe try to articulate the difference between what worship was in the midst of the Jesus movement and what it is now?
Well, I was going to say earlier, I mean, when we moved out here, we started going to Cross Point, Dr. James Merritt.
Yeah.
And this was the first time I got there. He sat down and then this huge production of worship songs. It was one of Phil Wickham's songs. This is Amazing Grace, whatever that's called. And it was just, smoke and lights and
production.
Yeah, and great vocals, extremely talented musicians. Atlanta is loaded with talent. And I thought, well, this is not what I expected. Expected something similar to what Calvary 316, something more, personal, kind of trimmed down now with all the lights and
less talented musicians.
Oh,
sorry, it was an easy joke. I saw it coming.
I saw that.
We don't have smoke.
We are getting the smoke
professional
machine.
drummer. We have a professional drummer playing next Sunday
no,
Cowboy hat.
with a cowboy hat.
extremely
And
talented.
shirtless.
All of the. I mean,
For Sundays?
Can we get smoke for Sunday? No.
but so the difference, night and day, in my opinion. Like I said, a lot of worship music early in the tent days and the chapel were chorus songs, and there's a little booklet, I think. And then there's another record called Psalms Alive, which is Billy Batstone. Mostly, I think most of the songs are his that he wrote. It's just taking psalms and putting music to them. Inspired in some ways, maybe even what David.
Well, yeah. If they're coming from Scripture, they were definitely
Inspired,
Inspired, right?
But so I'm comfortable with what's happening now. It was just different. That's
It's
all.
just different.
And what did I know? My first Bible was Good News for Modern Man. It was like a paraphrased New Testament. That kind of got my
How would
fingers wet.
you, if you had to define Christian music, like what is Christian music? How would you define that?
Well, I don't think it's at least the good stuff anyhow. I don't think it's anything different than secular music. It's just the theme of what's happening, the talent, the songwriting, the melodies. I don't really there is some difference, like when I
Yeah.
listen to the worship stuff. But when I listen to some of the bands that are just doing, or artists, solo artists that are just doing their songs creatively, I don't really see a whole lot of difference.
Yeah, see, I've always said that, like, I just Christian music. Like, I reject the premise that
Yeah.
like music can get saved, like that
Well, yeah.
music is inherently Christian or not Christian. It's there is no such thing as Christian music.
So
You have
there-
Christians that do music.
It's the lyrics, really.
Yeah,
when it comes
but you have
down to it.
Christians that do music.
That's it.
Like
That's
you
what
can have,
we were.
You
That's
can
what
have,
we are.
Right, you can have Christians that do an entire album with no words. It's a Christian album because it's a Christian that did
Christians
the
that play.
music.
Yeah.
It's a Christian that did the album.
Yeah, I can kind of dig that. You know.
So you guys, in a modern context, for me, you know, I go back and I listen to Dan. Like I think you guys were incredibly innovative, and obviously don't get any of the credit that I think you deserve, because whether you like your styles or not, you guys were innovative. You didn't fit into a box, and you were Christians that played music and expressed ideas. Like you weren't a worship band. You were Christians that were expressing things. You were learning and growing, and it was super creative, very creative. Everything, and the fact that you evolved all the time. I mean, it's U2-ish in that sense. Like, you know, you do listen to some of your '80s albums. It's like Zeropa, you know, or you go from Octoon Baby to Zeropa, and you're like, there's two different bands.
Yeah.
But like, there's that kind of an arc within Daniel Amos. Whereas like U2, always the Edge always plays the same style. For you guys, it's the way that the songs are written, I think is the
Different. Like I said, we try to kind of mirror the culture around us. Didn't do much for album sales. I don't know that I've ever made any. You know, the only money, you know, wasn't much. It was playing live shows. You know, but that wasn't why we were doing it.
So why were you doing it?
That was what God was giving us, this gift.
Yeah.
And I'm just a drummer, but you know, I'm playing. I go to the studio, and Terry's a brilliant songwriter. He comes up with these riffs and stuff, and I said, well, what can I do to contribute? So it was always like a contribute as a group. There was never like, you know, like do this. Or there was one song where Terry said, hey, Ed, come in here. And I said, okay. I came in there.
Right.
You know, it's simple, like, but a good fellowship and an expression of what God is doing in our personal lives and in our musical lives. Just simple as that.
Creighton, do we have any anything online? Any comments?
We have one comment from another longtime friend of the show, Jennifer. She says that her favorite of the Christian genres that you were talking about earlier is actually my least favorite, and that is Christafari.
Oh my
You
gosh.
also hate Christmas, so it's not.
That's
surprising.
also not
You know what?
surprising.
Very similar.
You can't trust a man that
Granted,
doesn't.
my favorite of that genre is Christcore, which is like metalcore that's Christian, and I loved that growing up. That was my jam in high school.
All right.
So Isaac, do you have a question? Do you have anything you want to ask?
Well, the topic that John brought up about the difference between Christian music and worship music, you know, I had a thought that, you know, Christian music, you can confuse the lyrics, you know, are they talking about God or their girlfriend kind of thing, is one way I've heard it.
It's like if you write a really poor love song, change a few pronouns and make it a worship song.
Exactly, because they never mention who exactly they're talking about. It's like, who is
Depends
this?
on what you're listening to. Like some of my favorite bands are still putting out albums, like POD and NMXPX.
POD's put out an album?
Just putting out
Yes,
a new
they
one.
have.
Yep.
No way.
Yep, still rocking it, man. And I love
Here
those
comes the
guys.
boys from the South.
Right, and so they're a lot of their songs are really in your face, and then but they're like a lot of people like they're Christian, and then when you actually listen to the lyrics, you're like, there can be no other thing but that. And I like what you said, something like when you asked them why did you do it? God called you, and it reminded me of a quote from a movie while I was talking about that baseball movie I just watched. And so the premise of the movie is this kid who has back problems essentially. He is in leg braces. This is back in like the 60s or something like that. And his dad was like this Baptist preacher. And he was like, you're not going to play baseball. You're only going to be doing work for the Lord and stuff like that. And he basically gave him an ultimatum. He was like, are you going to choose to play baseball or are you going to serve the Lord? And ultimately the kid came up and was like, I choose both. Like, God's given me a talent. I'm going to use my talent and serve God in that. And I think that's a lot of what Christian music was, and I think it is still to a point here.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
I'm musically impaired, so I have zero musical talent. But like, God gives you a talent to do something. Your obvious reaction in praise to that talent is to use that to serve the Lord.
Yeah, you want it to come back triple fold.
Right.
You want it to be. Yeah, we want it to be of use.
I think a lot of the things that we're seeing today, because money messes things up to an extent.
Absolutely.
And you see, and this is one of the things. Like don't have a lot of insight or et cetera into anything particular, but I do know, and I've talked to people that there were, especially even in our heyday, Justin, of Christian music, you had a bunch of bands so go to, like, EMI owned the Christian labels. Like, you had a big mega company that owned subsidiary Christian labels. And like, they would have a band that they're like, well, this band's not going to have widespread commercial appeal, but you know what? We can put them in this niche market and make some money out of it. And you had a lot of quote Christian bands. It was, they were watered down lyrics, but they weren't Christians. And I think that really distorted a lot of things.
Yeah, you kind of see that
Muddied the
movie
waters.
about Larry Norman and the Ragamuffin band. I think it's called Ragamuffin.
I have not seen that.
Yeah,
No.
it's
Larry
about-
Norman,
not
Rich
Larry-
Mullins?
Rich
Rich
Mullins. that's what I
Mullins.
meant. Rich Mullins. Yeah, he kind of gets into that, and it's an interesting movie because Rich Mullins wrote a bunch of worship songs.
Yes,
but
he
he
did.
also wrote a bunch of Christian music.
Yeah.
And so I think he's a good example of this debate we're having on.
My favorite Christian album of all time is Bob Dylan's Saved. You ever listen to it?
Slow Train Coming.
That's the second one. So he had two albums, Saved.
Yeah.
I've been saved by the blood of the Lamb, and I'm so glad. I mean, you had two Bob Dylan albums that were just so lyrically sound. That was that weird season of Bob Dylan's life.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that song Sunday. I need Sonya to figure out the piano part because it's all driven by the piano. I'll play it when we're done. It's a wonderful song. But Ed, I really appreciate you joining us and just kind of going down memory lane and sharing some of your own thoughts.
The memory thing, I remember things probably different than the rest of the guys. But I've been taking memory pills, but sometimes I forget to take them. So there's a lot of holes in the stories, but
so people don't realize. I mean, you're not just a professional drummer.
does that mean you get paid for it?
Right. Well, I guess whatever. But you are a semi-pro baseball player.
I played a lot of baseball.
I mean, you've won a World Series in amateur ball.
two
Two World Series.
Get your facts straight,
1995
okay?
and 2005.
And you were a pitcher, weren't you?
Oh, I started out throwing mud. And I probably can still throw 50 miles an hour, but
But you got rotator cuff issues.
Yeah, I ended up being whatever. I played whatever position was closest to the bench. It could be the bench, DH, and
When was the last time you wore the cowboy hat?
Almost every Sunday.
When was the last time you wore
I
the
wear it-
cowboy hat?
I
Almost
wear it
every
day.
Sunday.
I wear it every day.
It's actually kind of surprising that you're not wearing it now.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, it is a surprise.
I'm stuck
Well,
up in a booth half
it's
the time, so I
kinda-
can't
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't look good on camera.
There you go.
Neither does this, though.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, you got cowboy boots, that counts.
Oh, I got Luke Casey's. These are 40 years old. Keep redoing
That means you finally broke them in.
them. Yeah.
That's right. Well, hey, thank you so much for being on the
Sure.
Outlaw Radio Show, fellas. Thank you. Real quick, John, you got any questions? Are you good? All right, sweet. Anything left online?
No, we're good.
All right, man, I'm going to hit some music. Again, thank you so much for being with us tonight, the Outlaw Radio Show. What you've been watching, if you've been watching the live stream, will be released tomorrow as a podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasting. We still have problems with Spotify. We're working on that. We apologize for it. I know Spotify. But we are working on some of those issues. If you're listening to this and you've never joined us live, Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock, we go live. Next week, little programming note, next week we will be having probably a special Tuesday edition because we have a church event happening that Wednesday night. So just a quick programming note will be Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Next week. May God bless you, and we'll see you guys next week.